Welcome back to the deep dive. Where we like to get into the nitty-gritty of history's most mysterious books. And today is no exception. We're heading into some shadowy corners again.
Oh, yes, we are.
But this time, we're focusing on just one book.
Right.
Just one. For episode 188, we are diving deep into Clothed with the Sun, Illuminations of the Soul by Anna Kingsford.
Yeah, I think focusing on a single book like this is, it's really interesting. We often sort of jump around between different sources and try to piece things together.
Yeah.
But this gives us a chance to really immerse ourselves in one person's vision.
Totally. And even just that title, Illuminations of the Soul.
Yeah.
That just sets the stage, right? It's like we're going on a journey.
Yeah, it does. And she's very much guiding us on that journey too.
Yeah.
I mean, the book itself it's in two parts, Illuminations.
Okay.
Which are these kind of flashes of insight almost.
Yeah.
And then the Book of the Mysteries of God.
Okay.
So you get a sense of like a progression of understanding almost deeper and deeper.
And the title itself actually has a pretty fascinating backstory.
Oh, does it?
So Edward Maitland, who was really instrumental in getting Kingsford's work out there.
Okay.
He describes this moment like a flash of insight, where he was struck by this phrase, clothed with the sun, which is actually from the book of Revelation.
Okay.
And it just hit him like, this is it. This is the perfect way to describe the state of a soul that's,
wow,
bathed in spiritual understanding.
So the essence of the book kind of revealed itself to him.
Yeah, like it announced itself.
That's pretty cool.
And he was even given guidance on the physical design of the book.
Oh, really? Like the cover art?
Yeah, the cover art and the binding. He had another like flash of insight where it was very specific instructions. On the front, a woman standing in the sun, all radiant.
Okay.
And on the back, a monogram. A butterfly feeding on a twig and forming the initials AK.
That's beautiful imagery.
Yeah. Very symbolic.
Yeah, and very much in line with Kingsford's ideas. I mean, that butterfly, the AK monogram, it's all about the soul.
Yeah.
Drawing sustenance from the tree of life.
Yeah.
Feeding on spiritual knowledge.
And even the color was specified.
Oh.
The blood red ray of the innermost sphere where wisdom and love are one.
Interesting.
So you get a sense from the very beginning that we're dealing with someone who is very connected to these deeper spiritual principles.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And that's Anna Kingsford herself.
Right.
Many people who knew her considered her to have this direct line to divine wisdom, like a channel. Edward Maitland actually called her a divine soul with a mission to restore lost spiritual knowledge to humanity.
It's a pretty big task.
Yeah, definitely not messing around.
Sure.
So let's get into some of the specifics of that mission. Yeah. And I think a good place to start is this concept that she presents called the three veils.
Oh, three veils.
Yeah.
What are those?
So in her Illuminations, which is the first part of the book, Kingsford talks about this powerful dream that she had.
Okay.
And in the dream, she sees this golden chalice. And it's lined with 3 layers. And an angel explains to her that these layers represent the 3 degrees of heaven.
Okay, so like levels of heaven?
Yeah, kind of. So purity of life, purity of heart, and purity of doctrine.
Interesting.
Right. So already you're getting these different levels of spiritual attainment. And then immediately following the stream, she has a vision.
Okay.
And in the vision, she sees this grand temple, almost like an Eastern-style temple. And at the entrance is this tall angel dressed in white linen. And this angel is instructing people to destroy and discard all sorts of sacred Christian symbols.
Like what kinds of symbols?
Crucifixes, Bibles.
Wow.
All of it.
That's pretty jarring.
Yeah. Right. It's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, what's going on with that?
But then a voice booms from on high.
Okay.
And says, all the idols he shall utterly destroy.
So there's a sense that something needs to be cleared away.
Yeah, like a cleansing almost. And then the voice says to Kingsford, come hither and see. And suddenly, in the vision, she's lifted above the earth.
Yeah, okay.
She gets this new perspective. Right. And from this higher vantage point, she sees the temple bathed in this soft, beautiful white light. It's coming from behind the altar. But this light is obscured by a dark curtain.
So something's blocking it.
Yeah, and she asks about this veil. Why is the temple dim? And the angel reveals that it's not just one veil, but 3.
3 veils.
3 veils. Blood, idolatry, and the curse of Eve.
All right, so each one of these represents a different obstacle.
Yeah, and she's tasked with removing them. So the first veil is described as red and heady, the veil of blood. And with a lot of effort, she manages to pull it aside. And she proclaims, "I have put away the veil of blood from before thy face. Shine, O Lord God." But a voice from behind the remaining veils responds, "I cannot shine because of the idols." So then she encounters the second veil. This one is a curtain of many colors, richly embroidered with gold and silver, depicting all sorts of religious imagery.
Like what kind of imagery?
Crucifixes, Madonnas, scenes from the Old and New Testament, even idols from other faiths.
Wow, so all mixed together.
Yeah, all of it. This is the veil of idolatry.
Oh.
Again, she tears it away with great effort. "I have put away the idols from before thy face. Shine, O Lord God." And the light grows clearer. But there's still one more veil left. Its one is black.
Okay.
And it features an outline of 4 inverted lilies on a single stem. From behind this final veil, the same voice says, "I cannot shine because of the curse of Eve."
So that's the third veil.
That's the third veil, the curse of Eve. And she musters all her strength, rends this last curtain, and cries out, "I have put away her curse from before thee. Shine, O Lord God."
So what's the meaning of all this?
Well, it seems like Kingsford is saying that these 3 things, the blood sacrifice, the worship of physical representations, and this particular interpretation of Eve, they're preventing us from having this direct and luminous connection with the divine.
Like they're obstacles.
Yeah, exactly.
Blocking the light.
And she's not just saying believe, she's saying you have to actively dismantle these beliefs and practices
Interesting.
to really perceive the divine.
So it's a much more active role in spiritual awakening.
And the vision ends with a sunrise.
Oh, wow.
The budding of a fig tree, which we'll talk about later.
Okay.
And the temple ascending into heaven.
So like a new era
Yeah.
of spiritual understanding.
Exactly.
That's powerful.
Okay, so let's move on to another kind of tricky area.
Okay.
The Immaculate Conception, as understood by Kingsford.
I'm guessing she has a different take on this.
Yeah, she definitely does.
Okay.
Her interpretation is quite different from traditional dogma. She's not so focused on the miraculous birth of an individual,
Okay.
but rather on this concept of the God-man, a being who has transcended material limitations through love and spiritual purity.
This is more of an ideal than an event.
Exactly. And the Son of Man, she says, is not a single unique individual, but a collective, a representation of humanity's potential
Interesting.
to overcome materialism and realize our divine nature.
So it's about recognizing the spark of the divine within all of us.
Exactly. She even mentions the Gnostics.
The Gnostics.
Yeah, this early Christian movement, and suggests that they had an inspired understanding of the Immaculate Conception too, although she felt that they might have limited it to just Jesus and maybe even denied the reality of his physical body. Kingsford cautions against that kind of limited view. And she talks about the inherent difficulty humans have in grasping these spiritual truths. She calls it the blindness of the hearers who indeed hear, but who have not eyes to see.
Wow. That's a powerful statement.
Right. So we're so stuck in a materialistic worldview that we miss the deeper spiritual meaning.
It's like we're not even looking.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so a shift in perspective is key. Now let's talk about the soul itself.
Oh.
Where does it come from? What's its ultimate destiny?
Big questions.
Big questions. According to Kingsford, the soul originates from this gradual polarization of elements within the astral body.
The astral body.
Yeah, the subtle energy body that's between the physical and spiritual realms.
Right, so it's kind of bridge.
Yeah, like a bridge between the two.
And once this polarization is complete, the soul becomes this individual entity.
Yeah.
Capable of moving from one physical form to another.
Transmigration.
Transmigration.
Okay.
And she uses this really cool analogy to explain it.
Okay, what is it? Imagine magnetic forces converging and focusing into a central fire. Like a crystallization of magnetic energy. This central fire, she says, is the soul, the sacred flame within us. And while the physical body decays, the soul, once it's created, has the potential for immortality.
Unless it's destroyed somehow.
Yeah, unless its own perverse will leads to its dissolution. She stresses that this fire of the soul needs the higher air or divine breath to sustain it.
So it needs to be constantly nourished by the divine.
Moving towards unity rather than fragmentation.
Yeah.
And she talks about different forms of nirvana, celestial and annihilative.
A little intense, right?
That's all about.
So, celestial nirvana is complete oneness with the divine will and being union with this vast spiritual body made up of countless individuals harmonized by a single unifying will. Annihilative nirvana, on the other hand, is what happens when the soul divides itself. It scatters its energies and eventually ceases to exist. So it's a choice between becoming one with the divine or being completely obliterated.
Yeah. Integration versus disintegration.
Wow.
So it's all about the direction of the soul's journey towards unity or towards separation.
Now, what about this genius or daemon that she mentions?
Ah, yes. The genius. It's kind of like a personal spiritual guide in Kingsford's cosmology. The genius is like a moon that reflects the inner sun, which symbolizes God, to the planet, which represents humanity.
All right, so it's like a reflector of divine light.
Exactly, not an independent source.
That's an important distinction.
And its role is temporary. It guides the individual until they reach a state of spiritual regeneration.
Until they achieve a more direct connection with the divine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she calls this profound union the marriage of the Hierophant, which signifies complete spiritual integration at that point. The genius is no longer needed.
Makes sense.
She also talks about these things called reflex.
Reflex.
Which are way less beneficial.
Okay, how so?
They're described as insubstantial spirits, arising from bodily fluids.
Yeah.
I know, right? And they basically flatter and deceive. They whisper to you that you're a king or a Christ or the wisest being ever.
So they inflate your ego.
Exactly. They feed your illusions.
And how can you tell them apart from the genius?
Well, the reflex, they lack genuine spiritual substance. They're all about appearances.
Got it.
So one guides you towards truth, the other puffs you up with lies.
Pretty important to know the difference.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what about the gods?
The gods?
Yeah.
Where do they fit into all of this?
Well, Kingsford has a pretty unique perspective here.
Okay, I'm listening.
She sees the gods not as just figments of imagination or outdated fables, but as idola of the divine persons.
Idola?
Yeah. So she explains that an eidolon is like a reflection of a true object in the magnetic atmosphere, this transparent medium through which the soul receives spiritual sensations. So think of them like archetypes or spiritual blueprints that we perceive as individual deities. So they have a real existence in the spiritual realm.
But our understanding of them has become distorted.
Exactly. We've oversimplified them, turned them into just stories.
You're saying they're more than that?
Yeah, much more. Okay, so let's tackle a big one.
Okay.
The origin of evil.
The age-old question.
Right. Where does it all come from? According to Kingsford, evil arises from the very act of creation itself, from the projection of spirit into matter.
Okay.
This process of manifestation inevitably leads to a limitation of perception.
Right, because in the material world, we only see a small part of the whole picture.
Exactly. And she uses an analogy. Pure perception is unified, but our senses are specialized and limited. If we could perceive everything in its totality, there would be no evil.
Wow.
Because we would understand the interconnectedness of all things.
So evil is a result of our limited perspective.
Yes.
Of not being able to see the whole.
And she even suggests that without this limitation, without the potential for evil, God would have remained in solitary oneness. Everything would have been undifferentiated. And she makes a very interesting statement.
What's that?
She says that the being nearest of all to God is a woman.
Wow.
Oh.
What about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge?
Yeah.
How does that fit into all of this?
Kingsford offers a mystical interpretation of this classic story.
Okay.
The tree of life represents the divine will, the central life-giving force of the universe, and within each of us, the tree of knowledge, on the other hand, represents experience gained through transgression.
Transgression?
Yeah, like a descent from pure spirit into the complexities of matter.
So it's kind of like getting caught up in the illusion.
Yeah, it's like Maya, the illusion where we mistake the outward appearance for the underlying reality.
And what about the serpent?
The serpent. That classic symbol of temptation. Well, for Kingsford, the serpent represents that impulse. That leads us away from the inner reality and towards outward appearances.
So we become fixated on the form rather than the substance.
We prefer the symbol over the truth. It's a form of idolatry.
And Eve, what about her role in all of this?
Eve. She's not just the literal first woman. She represents intuition itself.
Intuition.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Sibyl,
Yeah.
the mother, who holds sacred knowledge. But she's tempted
Right.
by the allure of sensory experience
Yeah.
and the desire to reveal that knowledge before it's time.
So her transgression wasn't about eating a fruit. It was about
revealing
sacred knowledge.
revealing it too soon to the wrong people.
And that led to a loss of her spiritual preeminence.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale about timing and audience when it comes to these profound spiritual insights.
What about those coats of skin that are mentioned?
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The coats of skin. Kingsford interprets this as a further descent into materiality and the need for many cycles of purification and transmigration.
So the long process of getting back to that state of spiritual purity.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the prophecy of the time of the end.
All right.
Specifically, the symbol of the fig tree.
The fig tree, yeah.
Kingsford says that the fig tree is a powerful symbol of the divine feminine, just like the vine, represents the divine masculine.
Interesting.
And she points out that figs, they have these inward buds, they bear their blossoms within, and they produce fruit in darkness. All of these qualities, she says, resonate with the feminine principle.
The matrix.
Yeah.
The cup of life.
And so the budding of the fig tree is a sign that the day of God is approaching.
So it's a symbol of new beginnings.
Exactly.
And of the divine feminine.
Okay, now let's talk about Jesus.
It does.
Kingsford actually makes a distinction between what she calls the actual Jesus and the depiction we find in the Gospels.
Okay, so there's a difference. What is the difference?
So the actual Jesus, the perfected spiritual human being, is the culmination of humanity's ascent towards God.
Okay.
And she uses the passion flower as a symbol.
Yeah, passion flower.
Yeah. To represent his character, acknowledging his self-sacrifice, but also suggesting that he might have had some limitations.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what?
Maybe an excess of righteous indignation or overwhelming pity that prevented him from reaching even greater spiritual heights.
So even Jesus wasn't perfect.
That's what she's saying.
Interesting.
And she points out that he eventually withdrew into a solitary existence as a hermit and achieved this higher state of being in isolation, which she calls his true ascension, distinguishing it from the gospel narrative.
Right.
And she also proposes this really radical idea.
What's that?
That the gospel portrayal of Jesus' life is not just a literal historical account,